This video was requested by commenters. There were a few people that asked me questions in some of my more recent videos that I felt like I maybe needed to answer in the appropriate format. But before I jump into any of that, the contents of this video are going to be like kind of what started or what kicked off the events that lead into the Dance of the Dragons, the Targaryen Civil War that wiped out mostly all of the dragons. But before I jump into any of that, please do me a massive favor and slap a like on this video. If you enjoy it, that is. The like goal is going to be 420. Now, real quick, one of the first things that leads into the Dance of the Dragons, the Targaryen Civil War, that is the premise for this show, is there's too many heirs and too many dragons, right? So King Jaehaerys and his wife Alicent had multiple children. They all kind of died, right? Well, most of their children died before they did, right? So Jaehaerys had to pick one of his children's children, his grandchildren, right, to become the heir, okay? And this is where the problems arise, right? So along with the fact that Jaehaerys reigned for 50 years, something like this was bound to happen just to the fact that there were too many dragons and too many princes. As a matter of fact, during this time, there were more princes of the blood, of dragon blood, and more dragons than there were since before the Doom of Valyria. So it's pretty interesting that one of the problems of not having an heir is having too many heirs, right? That's crazy. Now, what I mean by that is that if there was one person who everyone agreed upon would succeed the current king in power, then there would be no room for discussion. There's one male heir because this society, Westerosi society, medieval real-life counterpart society, goes off of primogeniture. Basically meaning whoever the oldest male heir is, they take precedence over any other heir. Maybe, and most likely, that's usually an older female, right? So this society mostly runs off of that. Until Viserys decided to name Rhaenyra his heir, that was how it goes, right? So every single person, whether you're the Lord of Winterfell or whether you're a Prince of Dorne, well, actually, no, that's not true. Dorne is one of the few places where if there's an older female heir available, she'll take the reins of power, right? And her husband, whose name is less prominent than hers, will become the prince consort, right? But everywhere else, right? Highgarden and Winterfell, right? The Iron Islands, right? If you have a male heir and your daughter is like way better and like 15 years older, it'll still go to that male heir who may be like 2 months old at the time, right? That's just how that society sort of works, right? And because there is no one dragon prince defiant that will take the reins of power from Viserys and from Jaehaerys at the time, right? This calls in a question of succession. And another issue is the person who takes over after Jaehaerys the Conciliator, the longest ruling Targaryen king really in all of history, right? His next in line, Viserys, Rhaenyra's father, Prince Daemon's brother, right? King Aegon II's dad, right? If he was a different person, civil war would have been avoided. So what I mean by that is that if Prince Daemon had taken the reins of power and not Viserys, Viserys was chosen because he was older, but if Prince Daemon were the one that was ruling and it was King Daemon of dragons, right? That's one thing too is that you got to know that Viserys is literally nothing like his brother, right? So if Viserys was a little bit like his brother and a little bit less like how he actually is, probably would have prevented it. But what I mean by that is that if Daemon had become the king, he would have definitely named his firstborn son, whenever that happened, even if he had daughters first, he would have definitely named his firstborn son the heir. And also, because there was some sort of rivalry already presenting itself with all these dragon riders, right, and all these different claims to the Iron Throne, Prince Daemon would have done something about it. He would have literally said, no, this is the heir. Are you going to pay fealty to the heir? Oh, you aren't? Off with your head, and I'm going to burn you and feed my dragon. That's what Prince Daemon is about, right? He would have caused war and bloodshed and turmoil, but it would have been on a different scale. It wouldn't have been a massive Targaryen civil war, right? He would have taken his heirs and put them to use. He would have said, hey, son, daughter, y'all are marrying each other, so any bickeries y'all have because y'all don't have the same mom, fuck off with that, right? Daemon would have done that. King Viserys is told by Alicent to do that, to marry Aegon II and Rhaenyra together, so that way the two of them will rule. Targaryens had been doing that for generations, right? The Faith of the Seven allowed Targaryens to mate brother and sister and father and daughter and mother and son and all that stuff. They allowed them to do that because Targaryens are not like mortal men. They are of the dragon. They are literally gods amongst men, right? They can control dragons, and they have purple eyes in silvery pale golden hair, right? Those features and those powers and those abilities of fire magic are what set them apart from men. You are allowed to fuck your sister if you want to, buddy. But of course Viserys was like, nah, I don't want to marry them. I don't want to do that. I said Rhaenyra is my heir, and that's that. Right? So if Daemon had taken over, he would have married his children together. And also, what I mean by he would have put the dragons elsewhere and sent his heirs off to go do shit is he probably would have started a war with, he started a war with the Stepstones, but he might have started war with some of the free cities over in Essos, right? So all of his children and their dragons would have been off fighting wars to make Westeros bigger and better. And obviously, yes, it's terrible. Fire and blood, bringing it to, really anybody is the worst thing ever. But things would have been different if Daemon was king. You all let me know if you agree with any of the things that I just stated down below in the comment section. And another thing, if we want to say, Viserys had to become heir because that's primogeniture, he's older than Daemon. So if I'm playing around by saying Daemon was the heir and, primogeniture and all that stuff would have made shit better, well, here's the thing. If Viserys' heir, Rhaenyra, had children that were the typical Valyrian features, would have also been avoided as well, right? So Rhaenyra infamously marries Rhaenyra, and their children, even though both of their parents have typical Valyrian features, purple eyes, pale silver gold hair, pale skin, right? Even though both Rhaenyra and her husband Rhaenyra have those features, their children do not. They're rumored to be strong bastards, which means they have black hair and brown eyes. Not Targaryen features well at all. But they're still Targaryens because they can still ride dragons. So you could argue that their looks would have been looked over since they ride dragons, but that's not the case, right? So one of the things that sets Targaryens apart from men is what I had just mentioned before, is what makes them look like gods. They have purple eyes and pale silver gold hair. No one else in all of the known world has those features except for those with Valyrian blood. So, if Rhaenyra had heirs that look like that, maybe Alicent's sons, Aegon II and Aemon One-Eye, wouldn't have been able to hit the ground running and gunning with the strong bastards, right? So there's several times where Aegon II publicly announces that his nephews are strong bastards, and there's actually a group of Velaryons who actually say this claim as well, and they go and present their case to King Viserys, and King Viserys has their tongues removed, right? They're then known as the Silent Five. If Rhaenyra had actually made legitimate male heirs with Rhaenyra, maybe the war could have been prevented as well. But that's kind of one of my more weaker points. And lastly, before I get out of here, the actual maesters themselves, right? They're tied with Old Town, Paramore, the Twisted, basically created the Citadel, and the maesters, right? He would have groups of sorcerers and hedge wizards and just learned men in general come and share their ideas, and one of his favorite things to do was to watch them argue. So after Paramore dies, his father basically names the Citadel a place of learning, right? And the maesters are then, from that point forward, entwined with the High Towers, and the Faith of the Seven, right? There's several members of House Hightower who were part of the Faith Militant for the TV show anyway, the stars, and it's kind of hard to explain all of that in the books, right? But the fact that the maesters themselves are intertwined with Old Town and the Hightowers, I wouldn't be surprised if that's not something that's further explored on this show. Is like if there wasn't this grand gray rat conspiracy, right, with the maesters wanting to rid the world of Targaryens and Targaryens and dragons, right, because that equals an even playing field, right? Everybody sort of has the same amount of power because no one has dragons. Then that means that the world will be better off. So that's probably another thing that is sort of led into this Targaryen civil war, is the maesters influencing Sir Otto and Alicent and using them as pawns to bring about Targaryen death and destruction, right? So there's probably going to be several scenes where there's a few maesters that have conversations with Sir Otto and maybe threaten him into doing things, right? We're going to find out which way the show takes it. I want to thank you all so much for watching. Super special shout out to every single person you see listed right here. They are all members of my Patreon family over on patreon.com/SirHuntsReviews. And if you all watching want to leave a tip or anything like that, consider checking out the links down below in the description. I want to thank you all again so much for watching. My name's Mark, and this has been Sir Hunt's Reviews. Along that, as Eldrizas, Bustari, Ixos, Adao.